Well, let's go now to the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, who joins us from our studio in Westminster. Let me just begin with this whole question then of election expenses. Was the prospect of a number of by-elections a factor in why you've called an early election?
Absolutely not. This election has been called for all the reasons the Prime Minister set out, which is that it's in our national interest to have a strong government with a strong majority able to go in and have that negotiation with the EU and beyond.
You've got a strong majority of 17. You don't need this at all. I mean, isn't there an issue here with believing politicians when for months, it seems, you've had a unit working on the feasibility of an election while telling us that you weren't going to call one?
I think you have to listen to what the Prime Minister said. She has a strong reputation for considering ideas and changes and proposals carefully and then acting on them. And that's exactly what she's done here. She's been very frank. She set out the fact that she came to this reluctantly. But if she has decided, as the Prime Minister, that it's in the national interest for us to have the general election now so we can then go into those negotiations with the EU from a position of strength, not thinking we're about to have an election which would put the EU at some advantage, then that must be the right thing to do. I think she should be taken at her word, and I think she set out the reasons very carefully and very clearly.
Well, it's hard to see how a period of election campaigning is in the national interest when we already had a stable government. What it looks like to many people is you're taking advantage of a 21% lead in the polls.
No,
it's in the Conservative Party's interest, not the country's.
Well, it's just not the case, Christian. And I mean, the fact is, if this goes through tomorrow, and don't forget, it's not just about the Prime Minister, it's also about the members of Parliament. It will be 50 days until a general election. There'll be an opportunity then for us to set out the case as the Conservatives, why we think we can have a strong, stable government and why we think a good majority would be good for the country. And Labour and Lib Dems can do the same. In a way, it'll be an opportunity for the public to actually hear the arguments. Now we've had the referendum. Article 50 has been triggered. We know we're leaving the European Union, but what sort of leaving does that mean? We can give people those answers to some of those questions.
Well, we're looking forward to your manifesto. In the last one, you said your ambition was to get net migration down to the tens of thousands. Is that going to be in this Conservative manifesto?
Well, you'll have to wait and see. The manifesto,
are you going to ditch it?
The manifesto will be coming out shortly, and then we can all look at it and have, look at comparing it for differences and find out what the different parties are going to be going ahead with. I'm afraid I can't answer that question quite fully for you yet.
Have you had the conversation yet as the Home Secretary?
There's lots of considerations, lots of discussions going on about what's going to be in the manifesto over the next few days and beyond.
What about the triple lock on pensions, for example? Now, Labour have committed to that for the next Parliament. Is the Conservative Party going to commit to that?
Again, I'm afraid I can't give you an answer to that. We're going through our planning at the moment for the manifesto. All will be revealed when we set it out.
You don't seem very well prepared for a party that's just called a general election.
Well, as the Prime Minister said, she arrived at this recently and somewhat reluctantly, but she concluded it was the right thing to do. It will give us a strong mandate so that we can go forward, have those negotiations with the European Union and not be concerned about a general election just following the conclusion of those negotiations. And let's not forget that although Brexit is important, it is a major change and we approach it with our eyes open in that respect. There's so much more to be done as well. We want to take the opportunity to set that out in our manifesto as well.
Let me just bring you back to the question of election expenses and what the Crown Prosecution Service have told us today. If before June the 8th, any Conservative MPs are charged in connection with these cases, should they step aside or should they still contest the election?
Listen, we're not trying to get in the way at all of the proper due process of law. That must go ahead, but we believe that the Conservatives and the MPs in question and the agents have behaved properly. If there are any conclusions to the contrary, we will pay the fines, whatever is appropriate. But at the moment, what we've been focusing on today is the fact that we want to have this general election and we're making the case for it. The impact on the prosecutions, whether they make them or not, from the CPS is not impacted by this.
Amber Rudd, thank you very much.
Thank you.